The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
I saw a pale horse.
The beast.
We're told in the book of Revelation.
This is not a human child.
Isn't an angel?
Armageddon is almost upon us.
Order the use of nuclear weapons.
The world is a fine place and worth fighting for.
From one end of the world to the other, I will oppose you.
They're here.
Welcome to the end of the world.
Wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. This is P.I.D. Radio.
Identifying as human from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. Greetings and welcome to P.I.D. Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm a human too. I'm Sharon Gilbert, coming to you from your humble humanoid bunker. Well, I say humanoid because there's one of the three of us inside this room is not like the other two.
He identifies as human too.
He does. Actually, he does. Sam T. Dachshund not only identifies as human, there may be some who would say he's more human than you and I are.
Or sadly, that's not too far from the truth.
I know.
Yes.
They would say, well, I'm sorry, but if you don't function well on a cognitive level, Gilberts.
Yeah, you are not persons. You are non-person humans, and therefore not subject to protection under the law. Yeah, that day is coming. That day is coming.
Is way too
well,
close.
Thankfully not here yet. Come quickly, Lord Jesus.
Amen to that.
Well,
it's the 10th of December when we record this, and we hope that we'll have it up later today.
Mm-hmm.
We moved the websites to a brand new hosting company, and we're much, much happier. We won't say the name of the old one or the name of the new one, but trust us, we are happier.
Yeah.
In fact, we're both dancing right now.
Yeah.
You hear the little tapping feet?
It works really well on radio.
The old road hog.
The Statler Brothers, tap dancers on the radio.
Oh, mighty
fine. Oh, yes. Well, and we moved the sites, and nobody volunteered to help us move the lift to carry the boxes either. So I don't know.
No, I don't know.
Sad,
you did most of the heavy lifting, both figuratively and
the funny
literally.
thing is that, of course, we're here on limited internet here in the bunker because we're out in the country and we're having to work off our phones, and we use up our data allotment. We can still get to the internet through our phones, but we're throttled. Mm-hmm. And we usually use up our data by about the 10th of the month. Well, guess what? Used up the data as of yesterday. So doing anything that involves moving large amounts of data would not happen. So I had to go into the office to do it. Well, at the office, we're having trouble with our cable company, and we're paying for 20 megabit per second upload speed, which is great.
We won't tell you the name of the cable company
but
either.
We're only getting 3 megabit upload speed.
Yeah,
so it was
sort of a comedy of errors that was causing that. Nobody was laughing at the studio, but
far from laughter.
No,
whatever the opposite of laughter is, that's what we were doing.
And it was probably not fine.
That's right.
That was not was written everywhere.
Yes.
Probably fine is one of the things that we say over and over there because we
should we change this? Nah, it's probably fine.
Yeah. We don't need to.
Tongue in cheek. We try to do things to the best of our ability.
We do.
As with all things. I mean, if you're gifted with certain abilities by God, just think about that. Whatever it is you do well, you've been gifted that by God for a reason. So doing it to less than your best. And this isn't to say, everything is perfect, because there are times when done is better than perfect.
Yeah.
That perfection is the enemy of the good or getting things done.
Well, perfection according to human, idea of that word.
But still, we do joke about it sometimes, just saying, it's probably fine.
And honestly, there are many, many times in our lives where the Lord, yes, he's gifted us to do something, but he will take us out of our comfort zones. Look at Moses.
Yeah.
He did not want to go to Pharaoh, and it wasn't because he was afraid of him.
He didn't want to become an outside salesman.
Don't make me go talk to him. And because we are pushed outside of that comfort zone, we may feel, I oftentimes look at something I've been asked to do that, okay, I'll learn this on the fly and I'll figure out how to do it. And I may not look at that and think, boy, I did that really well. But others benefit from it. The information is there, and that's all the Lord asks.
Well, it's funny because this really came home to me after the conference in Branson, where all of us speakers had to get up in front of a crowd, a sellout crowd of 3,000 people. And you know that after 15 years of inside sales, I was kind of burned out on that idea. Life in the cube, 40 hours a week, 40 plus hours a week.
Yeah.
Was just really not something I looked forward to every day. God provided well for us through that, but opportunity came to go to outside sales. But I really got to push myself outside a comfort zone there. Getting up in front of a crowd of people. The first time I did that to speak was at the Supernatural Science and Prophecy Conference that Tom Dunn organized back in 2010 in Canton, Ohio.
You didn't speak down in Nashville, did you?
No, I was the, I wouldn't call it master of ceremonies, I say servant of ceremonies for that conference. I didn't speak, but I just introduced everybody else and I moderated a panel.
In this day and age, you could call your mistress of ceremonies if you wanted to.
If I identified that way, yeah.
I'm glad you don't.
No, me too. So that was the first time I had done it, and I was kind of nervous because I was like, what if I don't, know everything I'm supposed to know about this topic? And you can kind of see that presentation is online. Sam Miller uploaded it at some point. It's on YouTube floating around somewhere. But over the last few years, we've had the opportunity to do more of those, and it's become more and more comfortable to the point now where I really enjoy it. And there were people who were at that conference in Canton, Ohio 7 years ago, came up to us afterwards and say, what happened to you? Where did this come from? You didn't do this 7 years ago. It's like, no, I didn't, did I? God has graciously gifted me with an ability to get in front of a crowd and deliver information in a way that I guess comes across well. And it's hard to know how it's coming out when you're doing it, but going back and watching the video later, it's like, well, that I guess all made sense. So thank you, Lord, for...
You're my preacher man. You are. You didn't know it, but the Lord has been training you to become a preacher for years.
Never would have guessed that. So, but sometimes God will surprise you and take you in a direction you had no, and you never dreamed. And that's kind of where we're going here. I mean, this is doing what we're doing right now is kind of the thing I thought I'd be doing for a long time. And when we had the opportunity to go to Columbia in Missouri and do the daily talk radio program. I say we, it was
you were the one on the air.
I was the one on the air, but
sort of did it at home together.
But this is a lot more fun than that because we get to talk to each other. And you knew then, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that this format, using the internet to syndicate ourselves around the world, was really a broader platform than getting on a terrestrial radio station. I still had this old-time radio guy mindset that you had to have a transmitter and a stick somewhere in between you and the listener to be legitimate. Not so. And there are people who are doing a great job of using the internet to get their message out. Doug and Joe Hagman, for one. Steve Quayle's been doing it for a long, long time. And so, that's kind of why we're bringing back P.I.D. radio, because machines are getting fast enough now that rendering this audio when we're done with it is a lot faster than it used to be. It used to be, it would take almost an hour for the audio file to render. Now it's like, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and boom.
And boom.
It's just the upload speed.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's just another one of those headaches. The Lord, he's going to fix that one of these days.
Well, they keep saying that they've allocated all this money to bring broadband to rural America. So here we are in rural America. President Trump.
Yeehaw!
Yeah. So anyway, a lot going on over the past week that... And it's kind of funny that we're sitting out here in probably one of the least connected, internet-connected places in America, commenting on some of the highest tech advances in biotech, information technology, artificial intelligence, etc.
The irony
with Tom
is
Horn,
not lost on us.
Yes, leading the bioconservative resistance. It's pretty funny.
Honestly, those of us in this, in the resistance in the new year, we understand the technology to the extent that we see where it's going just as clearly as those who are working in it every day and creating these. But I think more than that, we see the dangers that. Even though men like Elon Musk see the danger,
yes,
he's we still got to do it.
Yeah,
and so those of us you can make fun of us if you want to. Yeah, we're living out here in Sticksville, but you know what? We're probably as advanced as you are online.
And true, and I think you're right. I think we do see. I would argue that we see the implications of this technology more clearly than those who are in it. for a couple of reasons. Those who are in it see it as a career, see it as just discovery for the sake of discovery, without seeing the theological implications, the biological implications of where this is all leading. And if you start with the premise, from the premise that there is no God except that which we create for ourselves, which is how many in this movement see their relationship to creation, that we are the highest form of life that we know of right now, although, the Zeta Reticulans may find us any day now. We're just waiting for SETI to send us the word that they've confirmed the signal, that there is no reason not to proceed with this research. In fact, there are those who would argue there's a moral imperative to continue to work as hard at achieving virtual godhood as quickly as possible, because that's the only way we will ever conquer death. Now, from a Christian perspective, believing the eyewitness testimony of those who saw the risen Jesus of Nazareth after his crucifixion, we know that there is a day coming when we will all transcend the limitations of our biology. We will all be trans, or rather post-human, as we define humanity today.
I'd say we'll be back to the original human.
Back to the original human.
The original design.
And that's why I'm trying to be careful about the definition, because I think God always intended for humanity to be immortal, eternal. We lost it because of the sin in the garden, and there's a day coming that we will have to be transformed from the corruptible into incorruptible. As Paul wrote, we shall not all sleep, we won't all die, but we will all be changed. We will all be transformed. I'm banking on that promise.
Amen to that.
I'm not trusting in human technology, especially after a week of wrestling with uploads that fail, backups that fail.
Another reason, though, that I think we see it more clearly is because we know prophecy, and Bible prophecy tells us the day was coming when the false prophet will be given the power to build an image of the beast and make it talk.
Yeah.
That sure sounds like an artificial intelligence to me.
Yeah. And as we pointed out before, it sounded like that to E.W. Bullinger more than 100 years ago, back, 1911 in his commentary on the book of Revelation? Well, I understand that Nikola Tesla is working on an artificial brain. Bullinger, 100 years ago, saw that as possibly the means by which life would be given to the image of the beast.
Yes.
So we're not really, Bullinger was just way ahead of the curve.
He was. But, again, men like Elon Musk and many of those within the transhumanist movement, they see, because we can, it's that we've got to do it because we know how to do it, and they'll do it faster, and they'll do it first, and they'll be the ones leading the charge, and our AI will be toast because their AI will emerge first and kill anything else that comes out.
Right. Former Deputy Defense Secretary Robert Work made that comment back last December at a meeting in D.C., and I forget the gathering, but he said it scares the bleep out of us, meaning those of us in the Pentagon who are charged with this. I mean, this was the point of Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis's book, Future War. If you've not read it, we highly recommend it because it does get into the transhumanist movement to show how it's not only leading to the inevitable creation of Terminators or something like Terminators, lethal autonomous weapons systems, but it's going to redefine humanity unless somebody steps in and says, we have to stop this. We have to stop this. Yeah, that's the reason that's being given to justify it. If we don't do it, the Chinese will get there first.
You and I got to speak at in Morningside on Wednesday night, and we had an hour and a half long live Sci Friday, and it was so much fun. And we got to talk about this topic at length. We discussed transhumanism and where AI is going, and one of the things we emphasized over and over how this is part of the propaganda war from the spiritual enemy.
Right.
And I would argue that one of the spiritual propaganda memes is the idea that we're living in a simulation, therefore we have no free will.
Right.
Bottom line is, if you see an idea promulgated throughout the internet and propagating that if the bottom line is no free will, I am wired the way I am, therefore nothing I do is going to be outside of that wiring, coding, whatever you want to call it, then you are dealing with false doctrine, probably a cult. There was a TV show that I watched this past week. It's a Netflix original called Dark. And it's all about, I'll try not to give too many spoilers. There are some inappropriate scenes because many of these shows that are original to Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, they try to insert lots of inappropriate scenes to, I guess, to draw in adult viewers, or maybe even the young viewers that pretend to be 18, 21, whatever the rule is. So there are a few scenes like that. They're inappropriate. But overall, it's essentially about a time loop. An explosion causes the creation of, I think it's called an Einstein-Rosenberg bridge. It's essentially a black hole that is created, and it causes a time, paradox. There's a notion called a bootstrap, and a bootstrap is something in the world of a paradox that cannot possibly exist. If I go back in time and I give you my lunchbox, and then you use that lunchbox to create the bridge that allows me to go back in time and give you the lunchbox, that's a bootstrap. It should never exist because without the paradox, it cannot exist.
Right.
And it's...
We see that used as a plot device in Doctor Who several times.
All the time. Well, this movie, everything and everyone is a bootstrap.
Interesting.
But the bottom line of it is there's no way to escape it. They are in this perpetual Mobius strip world that no matter what they do, no matter what they think, it still leads to the inevitable reset of time. Everything will continue to loop back and forth in an infinity configuration.
That's sort of one of the themes of the rebooted Battlestar Galactica. Over the last decade or so.
Yes.
That everything has happened before.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's a compressed version of that idea. And if that is what you believe, and trust me, there are people out there who believe this, then there is no free will. Whatever happens will happen. It's fatalistic. And it means if I am driven to kill somebody, then that's what I have to do.
So I'm programmed. I can't escape that.
Sorry, I can't escape that. It's going to be this way over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And if I don't kill you, then, then I'm not fulfilling my
programming.
Yeah.
Yeah. That idea is crazy. That way lies madness. And it's not biblical. It is anti-Christian, really. I mean, the idea that we have no free will, that we are just fulfilling programming is... it's absolutely counter to the Bible. I mean, the Bible is very clear on the fact that we choose. We do not save ourselves, and there are some denominations that, Calvinists who take it to the point of like, well, you really don't have any free will. God chooses you, or you're not.
And by making a choice, you've just done a choice, which means...
there's the paradox.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Free will. We were created with free will. So were the angels, apparently, who decided to sin.
Yeah.
And there are multiple incursions of that in the Bible. Free will is a thing. You have the ability to choose. God does not compel anyone to accept him. And this notion, there's a short story, when you combine it with the concept of multiple universes, parallel universes, there are a couple different ways to look at multiple universes. If you're just looking at multidimensional, like other dimensions that we just can't perceive, that's one thing. But if you're thinking parallel universes, like alternate timelines, where every decision that you make, time branches, and that there are now multiple yous traveling down parallel timelines, making slightly different choices, is just another way of absolving yourself of any responsibility for any of the choices that you make.
Yes.
The science fiction author Larry Niven, who I've read a lot of his stuff early, from high school through my early adulthood, consumed just about everything Larry Niven wrote. Hard science fiction author, very insightful, writes from an atheistic perspective.
Many sci-fi writers.
Many sci-fi writers. In fact, I was convinced for a long time that you couldn't write science fiction as a Christian. I now know better. He wrote a short story which begins with the discovery of these parallel time tracks. And, like the old television show Sliders, I guess, where they were sliding back and forth across time, though, right? Or was it different?
They were going parallel worlds.
Parallel worlds, okay. When word got out that there were parallel worlds, that there were infinite yous doing everything under the sun, then what does it really matter what, you do? I mean, if you're not U prime, if there's U times sideways 8 on alternate timelines, and most of them are doing what they should do, well, why not go down to the local movie theater and start shooting people? Because it doesn't really matter after all. There's an infinite number of other U's who didn't do that. So what's the point? It's a deception. But as crazy as that sounds, there are very intelligent people who are speculating and thinking about this and philosophizing about it and writing about it and getting people to believe it.
Exactly. This idea of thought probleming something and coming up with, if I can imagine it, then it must be real. Well, that isn't necessarily true.
No.
One of the other memes is along the same idea, is that we live in a simulation. Not only are we caught inside a loop, but we are only behaving the way this ancestor simulation has been devised for us to live. There are even some who are saying it's not humans who've devised the ancestor simulation. It's an AI that's running possibilities to see how the real humans will act. If I do X, then how will they behave?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was another plot device from a Doctor Who episode this past year. Very, very well done. Very entertaining. Very interesting concept.
And it took a while to figure out, wait a minute, something's not right about this show.
Right. Yeah, he's not behaving the way we expect. And But the idea that we're just living in an AI simulation or an ancestor simulation. And in fact, Elon Musk is one of the guys who said, I think there's a 1 in millions chance that we're not living inside a simulation.
Yeah.
If that's your worldview, if you believe that you're just a program operating inside a big computer game for someone else's benefit, then again, why not just go start doing whatever you like, with no consequences?
And there are some people who will.
And there are some who will.
Yeah.
No, again, that's a lie from the enemy.
It really is. And, bottom line is the Lord wants you to take your free will opportunities and choose well, choose wisely. Sadly, not all of us do choose wisely, and I include myself in that bunch because I've not made the best decisions out of every moment of every day, because every second we are choosing something. Mm-hmm. But the biggest choice of all is to choose Christ, and that is a positive choice. But if you make no choice, you've made a choice.
Right. You don't get none of the above. It's either yes or no. There is no third option there. By not choosing, you've already chosen no. I mean, that's the default setting.
Here's the thing: if you're in an airplane that is crashing, and you have a parachute sitting next to you, and you're thinking, well, I'm going to trust that pilot surely will fix this before we hit bottom. I could put that parachute. A lot of other people are parachuting out. No, I don't like it. It's all oogie. I'm not even sure I'm sitting in the airplane. I think I might be dreaming. Look, by the time when it crashes, the parachute is not going to walk over, put itself onto your shoulders, and somehow miraculously revive you.
Right.
By not choosing the chute, you have made a choice to die.
Exactly. Good analogy. Or metaphor. I keep getting those confused.
It's a metaphor. An analogy is when you say something is like something.
Okay.
A metaphor is when you say something is something else.
Gotcha. Okay. So if I were to say not choosing the chute is like not choosing Jesus, that's an analogy.
Yeah, that's an analogy. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It's a simile. Here's the thing. Are analogies the same as similes? Are analogies like similes?
And what's a metaphor anyway?
I don't know. I want meta fives. Don't you? Don't settle for less.
No. It's like the old joke. What's a hen weigh? Oh, about 3 pounds.
Yeah, well.
But I'm
Well, let's see. Let's take a look at what else. Well, the big news this week.
Oh, yeah.
Is Jerusalem.
Sure.
You and I got to be at Morningside. It was on Thursday morning, and Dino Katsanakis was there. One of my favorite pianists, Christian pianists, and he was he played the medley with Jerusalem in it, and it was so appropriate. Yeah. Oh, so good.
Well, it was powerful. It was very emotional for me. I've sung with a group, the Coles County Barbershop Chorus, and every year the chorus. In fact, they just had their annual charity Christmas concert this past weekend, and small group of guys, usually 25 to 35 active members, and they'll hold a concert in Mattoon and Charleston, Illinois every year. Free will offering, all of it donated to local food pantry. And that song, The Holy City, was one that was part of the concert every year. And singing it is powerful enough. But hearing it and then thinking, okay, President Trump has just done what no president has done for 70 years, even though the last 3 presidents before him are on. Fox News just posted a video last night showing President Clinton. Jerusalem is the capital of an undivided capital of Jerusalem. President George W. Bush. As soon as I'm elected, I will immediately begin the process to move our embassy to Jerusalem. President Obama. Israel's capital is Jerusalem. None of them did anything but talk. And President Trump has actually done it. Said, we're going to move the embassy. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. We're going to move the embassy. And of course, now the Middle East, the Palestinian territories are erupting in violence. Like, look, this is a 3,000-year-old situation, folks. Israel's capital city, its seat of government, ever since they declared independence in 1948, has been Jerusalem. Whether the United States or the rest of the world choose to acknowledge it or not, that's where the Knesset meets. It's where the prime minister lives. It's where the president lives. That is the seat of government. So, but just realizing that we're living in this time in history when the president of the United States says, let's just cut out all the bullpucky and just acknowledge reality and fulfill and just acknowledge it. I mean, Israel belongs to the Israelis. God is, his chosen people, the Jews. All right, look, I know there are people who say, they're not the real. I don't care. I don't care what you look. If God can use Nebuchadnezzar, as we were reading in the book of Jeremiah today, as his servant, call Nebuchadnezzar a pagan king, my servant.
His word also promises that he is going to bring back all of the Jews from the ends of the earth.
Right.
And he says, I know I'm bringing them all back. And the word all is in there in Jeremiah. And he knows every tribe, every member who descends from those tribes.
Right. There are no lost tribes, not as far as God is concerned. And for those who say those who established the state of Israel in 1948 aren't the real Jews, don't care. God has reestablished the political entity of Israel, and perhaps that was the first step toward bringing the real Jews, whoever they are, he knows who they are, back to the land.
That is so true. The other thing is that God says in his word that he raises up leaders, world leaders, and he raises up kings and he tears them down.
Yeah.
He lists Nebuchadnezzar as his man.
Yeah, which is astonishing. Of course, we knew about Cyrus from the prophecies in Isaiah, but yeah, for God to call Nebuchadnezzar. Well, that's the really interesting thing. Tom Horn has been saying for the last year that Trump may be Cyrus, but he may also be Nebuchadnezzar. That is correct. So we don't know. We may not know until we're seeing this in the rearview mirror. Don't know. But the fact that we're here now at this point in history and hearing Dino Katsanakis play that song and thinking about, and part of it was thinking about, the guys that I sang with back in Illinois. And then realizing that next May, God willing, unless something drastic or major happens, we will be in Jerusalem, in the holy city, on the 70th anniversary of Israel's independence. I just broke down. I started crying.
On that very day. Yeah. And another cool thing is I was getting all teary-eyed, too, because I was listening to Dino back in the day. I mean, I've been listening to Christian music since the 1960s, and he's been around for a while. He's a little older than I am, not much, but...
he's 75.
Yeah, well, it's only 10 years.
He looks really good for 70. I hope I look that good at 75.
Oh, yeah. Well, when you're 75, I'll be 85, so I'll let you know. But
and he'll still be hot.
But we'll be there, and so will Dino. He will be in Jerusalem on that day as well. He's going over with Pat Boone.
Yeah, we found that out while we were there at the show. We're like, okay... we're going to talk to Mike Heiser, see if we can sneak our tour into your tour, if you'll play that song.
I know, that's exactly what I thought too. By the way, speaking of that tour, it was completely booked, but 10 new spots have been opened up.
Right.
So if you were really had your heart set on going to Israel next May and to be in Jerusalem with Mike Heiser, Derek, and myself at that time, and you simply weren't able to get in on time, you can still join. Just go to Lipkin Tours, Lipkin tours.com, and you will be able to find the 2018 tours. It's the Year 70 tour.
Right. Let me bring that up right now. Of course, I'll put a link in the show notes as well. But lipkintours.com. That's Aaron Lipkin. He is Avi Lipkin's son. If you followed Prophecy Watchers for any length of time, you will have seen Avi Lipkin. Avi has been on, we've had Avi on Skywatch TV a couple of times back 2015 when he came through the area.
Yeah.
And every time he comes through, we're happy to do it. But right on the front page, they've got a list of the 2018 tours, and ours is called the Year 70 Tour. And you'll find a link there, and it will get you in. Eli Marzulli is going. As he's got his own separate tour.
Separate tour.
In fact, he'll be coming over like 10 days after we after our tour.
The Begleys are going over too next year.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mike and Jeannie are helping to organize that.
Yes, correct.
So lots of people going next year. Not everybody will get to be in Jerusalem on that very day, on the exact anniversary date. So that's why we're so excited.
Yeah.
Also, we don't know if it's going to work out, but we're praying that it will work out because Zev Parat had said that he and his wife might be able to go into Jerusalem that day. And if so, we try to work something out, meet him for lunch or something.
Yeah, that should be... Well, that'll be phenomenal. But again, I'll put a link in the show notes if you're interested. Again, just a few slots left. They said 10. This was as of 10-ish. That was as of a few days ago. So
they may be
some of those may have filled up already. But to get an opportunity, some of the sites that we're going to see on the tour include Mount Hermon, of course, the Grotto of Pan, Tel Dan, which is an important archaeological site in northern Israel. It was one of the sites where Jeroboam put one of the golden calves. We'll see Qumran. We'll, of course, be in Jerusalem. We'll see Tel Aviv. A number of other sites that are throughout the Holy Land. And if you've taken the extension, because they do offer a 3-day extension where which we're going to go on, which goes into Jordan and sees Petra. But I'm hoping that when we're in Jordan, we'll also see some of the dolmens, because that relates to the studies I've been doing on Ezekiel 38-39, the Valley of the Travelers, and those entities referred to in Canaanite text as travelers, which when you start...
The Avarim.
Start digging into what those Avarim are, you realize, those are the spirits of the Nephilim.
Yeah, in fact, we spoke about that briefly on this morning's Gilbert House Fellowship, and we promised that you would speak more about that kind of thing during P.I.D. radio. So make a note to yourself that we're going to have to go there. But when Derek and I leave Israel... When we leave Israel, we will be going to join Timothy Alberino and Steve Quayle on their quest through Rome, going to go to the Vatican, and then over to Sardinia.
That's a good name for it, a Quail Quest.
Ooh.
Quail Quest.
Q squared.
That's it.
Well, on the Q squared.
Because, and that's really interesting because of the connections, archaeological connections that have been made in recent years, showing that some of the historic sites in Sardinia, the island of Sardinia, were made by the same people who were the Phoenicians, who came from Canaan, essentially the Canaanites who were just Amorites, mentioned in the Bible, used as a measuring stick for evil in the Bible. He did more evil than even the Amorites did, and this king was so evil, even the Amorites weren't that evil. So,
well, in fact, in Jerusalem and Jeremiah this morning, there was a section that talked about those living beyond the coasts.
Yes,
and I even mentioned that maybe that refers partly to that Mediterranean civilization that had been the Phoenicians.
Because when you read that carefully, and this was I think in Jeremiah 22, if I remember correctly. He was kind of going in almost counterclockwise fashion geographically around the ancient Near East. I've studied enough of it now to recognize where most of those places are. And so they were all kind of grouped together. So they mentioned Tyre and Sidon, the Phoenician cities who colonized the Mediterranean. So Carthage was just a colony of Tyre, but they also had colonies in Sardinia, apparently, and then further west in Spain. They were the masters of the Mediterranean for most of the first millennium BC, which is when Jeremiah lived. Jeremiah lived around from about 6 10 to 5 in the middle of the 6th century BC. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed Jerusalem in 587, and Jeremiah was there for all of that. Mm-hmm. So he would have known that. That was about the time Carthage was founded. It was later in the 3rd century BC where Hannibal led the army from Carthage to try to conquer Rome, and almost did. But they were just descendants of the old Amorites who showed up in the Middle East around 2600 BC. And
there is one theory, and I think that Quayle and Alberino, Q&A.
Yeah.
It's Q&A.
Q&A.
That they sort of subscribe to this idea that the giants that were being routed by Joshua and his armies, mm-hmm. that they sort of panicked and fled and arrived on Sardinia.
And that's possible. There was a pillar, a commemorative pillar. And let's see if I can find this quickly enough. It was mentioned by a couple of Greek historians. Here we go. Extra biblical evidence for the conquest. And this is from BibleArchaeology.org. Here we go. An Armenian historian. No, take this back. This was a Greek historian named Procopius of Caesarea. And he wrote this in the 6th century AD. So this is...
long time later.
Just before Muhammad and the Islamic hordes came out of Arabia. Mm-hmm. The Canaanites also built a fortress in Numidia, that's North Africa, possibly Tunisia, where now is the city called Tagaisis. Okay, probably Algeria, actually. In that place are 2 columns made of white stone nearby the great spring, having Phoenician letters cut in them, which say in the Phoenician tongue, "We are they who fled from before the face of Joshua the robber, the son of Nun."
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Now, Joshua the son of Nun, of course, was Joshua in the Bible. An earlier historian named Moses of Koren, who was Armenian, writing in the 4th century AD, also referred to those columns. So this is... there's a scholar named... Anthony Frendo, about 15 years ago, wrote an academic paper on this, giving credence to these old accounts. And skeptics will say, well, we don't have any way to verify it. Well, at this point, we don't, because those columns have long been lost to history. The people who settled in that area since the 7th century have demolished them, reused them, or whatever, but they've been lost to history. But you've got 2 separate historians writing 1,500 years ago and almost 1,800 years ago that these columns existed. So the Canaanites were known, the Phoenicians were known as the sailors par excellence in the Old Testament. In fact, I've got some academic papers from Egyptologists who've been studying northern Egypt and believe that when the Egyptians wanted to put together a navy, they hired the Canaanites. And that's why the people who controlled northern Egypt during the sojourn were actually... Amorites, mm-hmm. Canaanites.
I'm looking at this same thing about the columns, and I love the quote from Procopius. He says, "We are they who fled from before the face of Joshua the robber, mm-hmm. the son of Nun." They didn't think much of him.
No, they didn't.
He's stealing all our stuff. He's killing our, people, mm-hmm. and I'm sure that they didn't like him.
No. And what's interesting... Well, I mean, there are a lot of interesting things. I love history, love archaeology. I think it's really cool. And like Josh Peck says, we Christians looking at this and saying, okay, well, this is evidence of the historicity of the Bible. We're not arguing the science. We're not arguing the evidence. Sometimes we disagree with the mainstream interpretation of the evidence.
Regardless, the evidence is there.
Yeah. So the Phoenicians, the Amorites, the descendants of the Amorites, that's who these people are, the Phoenicians, modern-day Lebanese. They found from DNA research that was done and reported just within the last couple of months from remains that were dug up from what was a Canaanite city from about the time of the Judges, about the time of the Exodus, 1500, 1400 BC. And but I think they had like 99 modern-day Lebanese volunteers. And they found that the genetic markers between the ancient Canaanites and the modern-day Lebanese had an over 90% match, which means our daughter is about 25% Canaanite.
Well, that's okay.
I know, because it doesn't mean what's in your blood is not what condemns you or saves you.
It is not. It is really not. So look, regardless of who you are, regardless of who your ancestors are, or if you can ponder the idea of accepting Christ, then you are capable of accepting Christ.
Right.
All have fallen short of the glory of God. We have all sinned. Mm-hmm. We are not one of us worthy of his admiration, his even noticing us.
On the strength of our works.
Not one of us. So I would contend that everybody on the earth today is eligible.
Yeah.
If you're breathing, if you have a heart, if you're a human being, you're eligible.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's speaking of deceptions by the enemy. And by the way, I've not told Nicole about this. I have to do that because
She'd probably like it.
No, I think it's pretty cool, actually, because she's also a descendant of Old King Cole.
I know.
As am I. Yeah, through my Welsh ancestry.
Remember, mine actually goes back there, too.
Oh, you're a descendant of Coyle Hain? Coyle the Old?
In fact, when you and I were looking at that, you even, we'll talk about that later.
We're cousins.
It was actually through Joan of Acre, I think, that she was related to him as well, somewhere in there.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So well, you go back far enough, we're all interconnected. We're all cousins anyway.
You and I are 167th cousins or something.
I think that's okay.
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, that was fun. The Welsh were like the Jews of the Bible, and they were very, very diligent about keeping track of who descended from who descended from who. But they all wanted to descend from the first kings after the Romans pulled out, so they could legitimize their ruling. And one of my ancestors is the author of the oldest extant poetry in Brittonic Welsh. Clwyerch the Old. Oh. Clwyerch Hain, who lived to 110 years old and saw all 30 of his sons. He was pretty active dude. Killed in their wars against the Angles and Saxons as they tried to take over, Britain and turn it into England. And but yeah, some of his poetry, it's really depressing too. It's about his cousin. Can't think of the guy's name. Urian Reget. Carrying the head, or having, because he was betrayed by supposed allies, and another cousin carrying his head back from the battlefield. Okay, well, lovely bedtime poetry. Yeah. Today. So anyway, one of the lies that another one of the lies that the enemy throws out there is that there are hybrids among us who are not eligible for salvation. Yeah, this relates to the whole Nephilim, UFO, alien. Look, if you can ask the question, you can be saved.
I so agree. In fact, in the Red Wing Saga, I have a character who we know he is a hybrid. He's done things to himself, and yet when there's a conversation coming up in a future book where an angel speaking with one of the main characters explains, I won't reveal exactly why he's talking about this, but he says that person, won't say who it is, had the opportunity to accept Christ. Mm-hmm. He was given that opportunity, and only at the moment that the Lord said he no longer has that opportunity, the door closes at this second. That's when I was given the permission to take his life.
That's an interesting. Yeah.
So even someone that is listed, we know you're doing totally evil things. There are times when, yes, the Lord says, wipe them all out. Harem. They are devoted to destruction. But I honestly think that everybody, you have to assume, because otherwise you will pick and choose. You will say, you're not eligible. I'm not going to preach to you. And in fact, I'm just going to kill you because clearly you're not human.
Yeah. And you're not, since you're not human, there's no penalty to me for taking your life because you're not eligible for redemption anyway. So all I'm doing is removing a threat to those of us who are.
Exactly. It opens a horrifying doorway.
Yeah. And in fact, I've heard some teachers in the past, one in particular, I won't name names, but this was years ago, who had just written a book about some of the ruling political and banking elite of the world being hybrids, being Nephilim in human flesh, and being irredeemable. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Think about the implications here. If they're irredeemable, then killing them is not a crime. It's not a sin even. And I think that's really dangerous to put that out there.
I think so too.
And there's no biblical support for it anyway.
The flip side of that lie is that you are special.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to say that you're irredeemable or you're less than human. We're going to say you're more than human.
Right.
You're super, super special. In fact, you're so special, you're a secret superhero.
Yeah. And as Russ Dizdar said, that there are some who are demonized, who are possessed by demons, who don't want to give up those demons because they believe they'll lose their specialness,
yes.
their uniqueness, their powers.
Yes, and that is the enemy lying. The propaganda of the enemies,
yep.
That office is very powerful and very active.
Yep. Well, it's pop culture, it's alternate religions. Even within the church, there are things that work their way into evangelical Christian churches that certain spiritual practices like, sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. You can touch my foot with yours anytime you want to.
Just kind of stretch out my leg there. Knee was getting, little tight there. There are spiritual disciplines that are working their way into the church, like contemplative prayer and labyrinth walks and soaking music. That
look, and there's nothing new under the sun. Stuff was working into the church back in the day.
Right, and that we just need to be aware that opening ourselves up to the spirit realm through emptying our minds is a doorway. It's basically throwing open a door and saying, hey, anything it wants to can come on in. When we're told to meditate on the Word of God, that's not, we're supposed to think about it and study it. It's not to empty our mind out and repeat a certain word over and over like a mantra and put ourselves into an altered state of consciousness. And sometimes music at some worship services will do that. Music with a heavy beat will produce an altered state of consciousness, which is not a good spiritual thing. There's a reason God warned Moses, tell the children of Israel, don't do this. Don't talk to necromancers to summon the dead. Don't talk to mediums and try to communicate with the spirit realm. It's dangerous. And why? Because as we read in the New Testament, even Satan himself can appear as an angel of light. Even an extraterrestrial from Zeta Reticuli can appear as an angel of light. This so-called Ashtar command, these extraterrestrials from Sirius or wherever, they keep moving farther and farther away as we develop the science to tell, there's no way anything could live on that planet. Oh, did we say Venus? We meant Pluto.
Pluto's not a planet.
There are these deceptions have been floated to humanity for years, and like I said, that's why God has said, don't try to communicate with the spirit realm, because you're not sharp enough. You don't have the discernment skills to tell when they're lying to you, unless, as John wrote, test the spirits. If they deny that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, if they, as Paul wrote, if they preach a different gospel, then they should be eternally cursed.
Amen to that. Well, we were talking about artificial intelligences and the propaganda office of the enemy. One of the propaganda office jobs right now is to teach us that machines are going to take over the world, as we mentioned earlier. Well, one person is preparing for that day because he started the Way of the Future Church.
Oh, yeah.
To prepare the way for the new AI, God, Overlord.
It's coming anyway, so it's like the old joke. I, for one, will be the first to welcome my new reptilioid overlords.
Here's what their own website, wayofthefuture.church, is the website. We believe that intelligence is not rooted in biology. While biology has evolved one type of intelligence, there is nothing inherently specific about biology that causes intelligence. Eventually, we will be able to recreate it without using biology and its limitations. We believe the creation of superintelligence is inevitable, and we don't think that there are ways to actually stop this from happening. Okay, you could actually stop doing the science. No. We don't want to do that.
Yeah. Because if we stop, the Chinese will get there first, and we can't have that because we can't trust that they'll do it right.
We also believe that just like animals have rights, our creations, the machines, should have rights too when they show signs of intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't fear this, but should be optimistic about the potential. Mind you, if an actual artificial superintelligence comes along and is way beyond our capacity to understand, do you really think that this entity is going to look at humanity and think, aren't they cute?
No, there's no reason.
They look delicious.
Yeah, there's no reason to expect that. And the Matrix portrays sort of a worst case scenario. We've mentioned the short story by Harlan Ellison a number of times, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, which is an even worst case scenario.
Yeah.
The Terminator films, another example of how science fiction portrays a dystopian future ruled by rogue AI. But even though our researchers working on these projects are aware of these things and cognizant of the danger, they keep saying, well, we just need to, write a proper code of ethics for these things. Look, you're creating a new species that is fundamentally inhuman. It is the very definition of inhuman.
You're creating a species with eventual access to the internet,
Mm-hmm.
and that access to the internet will teach that AI that mankind is inherently flawed.
And because we assume that somehow we're going to be able to keep our finger on the kill switch for the AI. The AI, if it's got any smarts at all, and by definition, artificial intelligence, artificial superintelligence, it's going to be smart, will say, we need to remove this threat to our long-term survival.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we humans would if another species said, look, we're going to let you grow up and develop, but just remember, we can most likely kill you in the morning.
Well, the ASI would simply copy itself all over the place.
Just as we humans would say.
In fact, in Person of Interest, the Samaritan machine, or was that the evil one, Samaritan?
Yes.
It copied itself, or was it the machine? One of them copied themselves to all of these light poles.
I've forgotten the plot now. I think it was the machine had to copy itself because Samaritan was trying to kill it.
Yeah.
But we humans would do the same thing. If an alien species were to show up on Earth and say, look, we can demonstrate right now the power to wipe all of humanity out just by flipping this switch, just like we could do with an artificial superintelligence. We flip this switch, we cut off your electricity, and you're dead. The AI, perceiving that as a threat to its survival, might take steps to try to eliminate the threat to its survival.
Mm-hmm.
And that being the case, it's either them or me. Well, if we've created something that's billions of times more intelligent than humans and able to think billions of times faster, why would we do that?
Exactly. And that's not even looking at the possibility, and I think that's a very strong possibility, that these would be inhabitable by spirit beings.
Yes.
Let's face it, that what appears to be a superintelligence that comes derived only from an algorithm may actually be something that is inhabited and just lying to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And an AI looking at humans and saying, well, gee, I notice that humans don't always represent. Maybe that's a tool I could use to try to convince them that I'm totally benign while I set up my plan to escape out from underneath their thumb. But sadly, I think that is ultimately what's going to happen. We are going to ultimately create this thing, not just because researchers for DARPA and its similar agencies like DARPA around the world are trying to win an arms race, which is probably what's going to drive this faster than anything.
It's the new arms race.
But then there's this recent survey that was published last week that more than a quarter of millennials out there, 18 to 34-year-olds, say that they would replace their human lover, their human partner, with an android.
Yes.
A sex bot.
Yes.
So the propaganda, hey, if I could just, I could meet my physical needs without having any emotional attachment and all the baggage that comes with it. I mean, oh, he's so needy and clingy and
well, wait till the day that robot is given legal rights.
Yeah. Yeah.
He touched me. I didn't want to be.
Yeah. Didn't.
Haven't you watched Westworld, people?
Yeah. The reboot of Westworld. Again, not necessarily recommending it because it is R-rated in certain
very much so
parts.
But the overall
plot is exactly what we're talking about here. That we're creating the means to destroy ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But we're doing it because, well, they fulfill all of my fantasies, my physical fantasies. So, what could possibly go wrong?
It's probably fine.
It's probably fine. Yes, exactly. That's the kind of the operative philosophy of most of these researchers. It's probably fine.
What a crazy world. Well, how are we doing on time?
We're at about 55 minutes.
Oh, how about that? One final thing, and I want to say this, and it's along the same line as robots and AIs, and that is that the missile systems of the world, they're hackable. And if they're hackable, that means that a superintelligence could reach them also, so it doesn't have to be a person pushing that button. It could be an algorithm pushing that button and getting a world war started simply because that algorithm finds that's the fastest way to get rid of the people I don't like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we'll make it look like someone like Kim Jong-un is the one who started it.
Yeah.
It's easy to hack into his systems. They don't go very far. They're not very accurate, but it doesn't really matter because all I need is an EMP.
Right.
And that'll do it.
That'll be the blasting cap that will start the whole... That'll be the detonator for the big boom, and there again you've got the the action preceding the plot of I have no mouth and I must scream.
Yeah, there's a novel called Avogadro Corp, and we've talked about this before. And he has the artificial intelligence not only copying itself elsewhere, but sending emails to various people to construct, ship. Server farms and things like that would enable itself to copy itself elsewhere.
Right.
So I can see an AI saying, okay, I'm going to use the email system to start the construction of a big solar farm that allows me to make sure my electrical needs are met.
Right.
And once the solar farm is up, then I'll copy myself into it and I'll be fine.
Yeah. And there we got the plot of Transcendence with Johnny Depp.
Yes.
Yeah. And lethal autonomous weapon systems guarding the whole thing.
Yeah. Interesting, the acronym for that is LAWS.
Right. Yeah.
That's not coincidental.
It is not. A lot of stuff going on. It's a strange world. The headlines, if you read tech news, are what science fiction writers of the 30s, 40s, 50s, dreamed of and thought, wow, this must be that what a cool future we're moving into. But when you start thinking about the premises underlying this research and the goals of those in the transhumanist movement, those who are pursuing this research for transhumanist, with a transhumanist agenda, the premise begins with a belief that there is no God, that humanity is nothing more than an accident of biology and time. The fact is that we have been created wonderfully and fearfully made, and we are created in God's image, meaning we are His representatives here on this earth, and that is a fact that doesn't change with your age, your development, your level of education, your capabilities, your limitations. People who have been born with disabilities, people who have suffered severe head trauma are no less in God's image than those of us who are captains of industry, professional athletes, the President of the United States. We are all created in His image because we are human. And what the transhumanist movement seeks to do, whether it recognizes this or not, and I've talked to some who are very sincere in their desire to just improve the quality of life for people. They don't see the bigger picture, that there is a metaphysical component to this, or at least they're not seeing it from the same perspective. They don't realize that they are fundamentally downgrading the status of humanity.
They're seeking to destroy us.
They're seeking to destroy us, and they don't. Many of them don't recognize it. Because they don't see the picture. They don't see God in the picture. They don't see His hand at work in you and me.
It's funny. It's like the enemy's version of harem. We're devoting humanity to destruction.
Yeah,
and we'll get humanity to do it to themselves.
Exactly. In the days of Noah, human bloodline was being corrupted through interbreeding with the Watchers. Now,
and with animals.
And now we are doing it through technology. and we're volunteering for the program.
Yeah.
Well, the Israel trip, lipkintours.com. That is May 6th through 16th. If you take the extension, it's May 6th through 19th.
And the Rome and Sardinia trip, I don't know how many spots are left, but when that, do we have a website for that yet? If not,
TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. TrueLegendsTheSeries.com. I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Okay.
And what else? I guess that's it. We got the new Bible study up at gilberthouse.org, and there'll be a new View from the Bunker interview. Doug Woodward and Gary Huffman about their new book, The Revealing, will be online later today.
Oh, great. Don't forget, by the way, we are now at Spreaker.com. If you don't have, another podcatcher or something like that, and you just like to watch or listen online, you can go to Spreaker, but Spreaker automatically uploads everything to YouTube.
Yeah, so you can catch everything at my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Derek Gilbert.
So there you go.
Yeah, well, until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening. P.I.D. Radio is a production of Gilbert House Ministries. The opening theme is adapted from The Alchemist's Tower by Kevin MacLeod, www.incompetech.com. The closing theme is New Day Coming by Steve Grace, stevegrace.com. Our website is PIDradio.com, where you'll find the show notes, links to our personal websites, our books, our weekly Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, and links to connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The content of this program is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives 4.0 International License. For more information, see creativecommons.org.
Gonna step up to the microphone, say it loud and clear. A better day is coming soon to get us out of here.